everyone, I'm Jenny Dorsey. I'm a professional chef, writer, and the founder of a nonprofit community org called Studio Atao. And today I'm in my home kitchen for a home version of Alt Baking Bootcamp. Today I'll be making vegan protein cookies. I really love this recipe because it's super easy and it's very, very customizable. You can essentially make this cookie base and reimagine it with all these different types of mix-ins or flavorings depending on what you're in the mood for that week. We'll also be using vegan protein powder so that you can sneak in a little extra protein to keep you full during the day. These cookies have about like 2 to 3 grams of protein each. A regular cookie recipe usually uses lots of butter, sugar, eggs, and all-purpose flour. So we're gonna swap all of that out today, and instead of butter, we'll be using coconut oil. Instead of eggs, we'll be using flax eggs. For sweetness, we'll be using honey, and instead of all-purpose flour, we'll be using 2 grain-free flours, coconut and almond. All right, so for the first step, we are gonna use some coconut oil, and you can see right now it's like loose, but it's not totally melted, so we're gonna go and melt this down. It's really, really easy. Just stick it in the microwave for like 30 seconds and it's done. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back with our melted coconut oil. So we're gonna combine all our wet ingredients together essentially, and then we're gonna do our dry. So our other wet ingredient is some flax eggs. You've probably seen us use flax eggs in a couple other recipes, and they're very, very simple to make. Essentially, you're using 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed for every 3 tablespoons of water. So today we're using 4 flax eggs. So I'm gonna go add some water to this and mix it up. When you first put the water in your ground flax meal mix, you'll see that they're just kind of hanging out, nothing super exciting is happening. When you let it sit for a little longer, the flax will absorb a little of that water, and you'll see kind of like a loose gel kind of form on the outside, and that binding power is what we're looking for to help hold everything together in our cookie recipe, because eggs act as both a leavener as well as a binder in regular cookie recipes. We're gonna just let this sit for a second here, and I'm gonna add in my honey, and then we'll add back in our flax. There's some discourse on if honey is vegan or not. If you don't wanna use honey, you can totally just use maple syrup here. Okay, now I'm gonna add our little flax eggs. And I know it kind of looks like it won't mix, but it will slowly mix together. You just wanna mix it together so it's like kind of binding together, but once we add all our dry ingredients, things will start looking more like dough. So once we have our wet ingredients here, I'm gonna add a little bit of salt. And with that, I'm also gonna add some pea protein. Of course, if you have a different preferred type of protein powder, feel free to use it. So I'm gonna go in with the protein powder. This is 4 scoops. So most protein powders are water soluble, so you'll just see them starting to disperse. And you wanna mix this well so you don't have lumps of protein powder in your cookies, because that's not what you wanna bite into. And this is what I mean, you get kind of like this glossy sort of consistency, and that's pretty normal. It starts to thicken up considerably. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm gonna go and add the rest of our dry ingredients. So I'm gonna add our baking powder. And because this recipe doesn't have any gluten in it, as we've discussed before, it won't form that gluten matrix. So it does usually need more leavening help, hence the flax eggs, hence a little extra baking powder, but they're not really going to rise the same amount as regular cookies, which is totally okay. I'm also gonna add our flour. So we've got 2 types of flour here. We have almond flour and coconut flour. We use this a lot on this show because the 2 of them really combine well together. Remember that coconut flour is super absorbent, so you wanna be careful on how much you use. While almond flour is really nice because it adds nice like crumbly, you know, like not flaky, but like a loose texture that is just like desirable in a soft cookie. I'm going one by one just because this is a little bit of a thicker mixture because of the protein powder, and I wanna make sure that each of the ingredients are evenly dispersed before I move on to the next one. So you'll see that was the coconut flour, and it always is the most absorbent thing and it immediately kind of sets up. So at this point, this is your base cookie dough. I'm doing carob powder and walnuts because that's a combo that I found is nice. I rather like kind of like chocolatey, pick-me-ups in the middle of the day. And carob powder is both chocolatey, but also a little bit bitter. So it adds like I think it adds a nice contrast to the sugar. Carob powder is often used as a cocoa powder substitute. It's made from dried roasted carob pods. It's both sweet and a little bit more bitter and has those like deep, dark cocoa chocolatey notes that you like in chocolate, but it's definitely a lot healthier for you, and it's minimally or usually less processed than most cocoa powders. I also have some toasted chopped walnuts over here, and I'm just gonna stir that in. You can use whatever nut your heart desires. That looks pretty good, and now all we have left is to shape these and put them in the oven. Try to keep these cookies small-ish because you don't want like a ton of protein in your belly, like not super great. And they're not going to expand too much or rise too much. So you don't need to place them as far apart as regular cookies, but you don't want them like obviously right next to each other either. I like to roll them up and then kind of flatten them into like a cute little disc. Try to keep your cookies a consistent size, obviously, because then they'll cook at the same rate. If you have like a ice cream or a cookie scooper, feel free to use that. So these cookies will cook in the oven at 350 for about 10 minutes. Again, they're not gonna rise a ton or like spread out a ton, so you're just looking for the cookies they usually rise a little bit, sometimes they crack a little bit, like not in a bad way, but they'll just kind of open up at the top, and then the bottoms will be a light brown color. So the oven's preheated at 350, and I'm gonna pop these in, and they usually cook for about 10 minutes. So it looks like our cookies are done. Smells good, it's been about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna pull them out and let them rest for a minute before we dive in. If you look at the bottom, there's like a nice little brown to the bottom. And they're very moist. With that, thank you so much for joining me in my home kitchen today making vegan protein cookies. Please comment below, let me know how yours turned out, if you did use different types of variations. Love to see any photos of your final results, and the full recipe is below if you click on the description. Make sure to subscribe to Well+Good's YouTube channel for many more alt baking bootcamp recipes. See you next time.